So, Dr. Mugambi, thank you so much for joining me today on OMSC's Roundtable. This is a new media series under OMSC where we talk with scholars and also PhD students who are in the fields of mission studies and also world Christianity. It is wonderful to have you here, especially at OMSC House as you're visiting here in Princeton. So welcome, Dr.
Thank you so
Mugambi.
much. Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank
Yes.
you. To get this conversation started for today, I would love to hear more about you as our viewers and listeners would like to as well. So do you mind sharing with us about your academic training, where you did your PhD and what field you did your PhD in?
Yeah, so my academic training has been in Kenya. And I did my PhD at Africa International University at the Center for World Christianity. And so my PhD is in World Christianity.
Wonderful.
Yeah, where I researched, the PhD research was on Pentecostal churches in Nairobi.
Yeah.
And I was investigating the question of leadership and leadership training in those, 3 case studies. Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you. And just hearing how you're interested in Pentecostalism has been really a primary focus for you, right,
Yes.
over the years?
Yes, yes, that's my entry point,
Of course.
into world Christianity. Pentecostals are, one of the fastest growing religious expressions.
Yes.
And within Christianity, also one of the fastest growing.
Of course.
And many of those are, very well represented in Africa. So, the demographics will say about 1/3 of the world's Pentecostals would be found in Africa. And going forward, the countries with the largest numbers of Pentecostals would be in Africa. And so that, for me, is an area of interest. But it's also an area of interest for me, not just because it's a fast-growing, expression, but it's also an expression that is very well represented in Kenya, not just in the independent Pentecostal communities, but also forms of it in the historic mission churches as well. And then also for me, it is an expression that I'm very familiar with.
Of course.
It's one that over the years, having been raised as an Anglican, it is an expression that I have been in, I have experienced it, and have seen its workings, and have research entry points.
Yeah.
But also one in which there's so many unanswered questions.
Of course.
As one who's from within the movement, but also looking outside as a scholar, and have wanted to understand more.
Yeah.
And so it's become a very fruitful line of inquiry for me.
Well, thank you for that answer, and it's wonderful to hear that how your academic interest also aligns with your personal journey as well.
Yes.
So it's very fascinating. Thank you for that answer. And I'm curious now, you've earned your PhD in the Global South, but now you are here in the Global North, teaching in the Global North. I was wondering if you can share where you are currently situated, what institution you are in right now.
Yeah, so over since 2022, I've been teaching at the Yale Divinity School, where I teach world Christianity. And this is for me, a real privilege, because world Christianity as a field of study essentially, that's one of the places, Yale Divinity School is one of the places which advocated for a new reading of missions and of mission history and of theology in the non-Western world. And in a sense, Yale is where one of the places where world Christianity was born under the teaching and the writing and the thinking of Lamin Sanneh.
Yes.
And I would consider him one of very senior scholars, senior historians of world history, scholars of Islam, a scholar of Islam and Christian traditions. But also, one who, I knew personally and who, who I got to interact with, and whose thinking has very much been, very important in my own understanding of how to reflect on Christian expressions in the non-Western world.
Yeah, indeed, a giant in our field, Dr. Lamin Sanneh, who influenced many world Christianity scholars and graduate students as well. I'm also curious, Dr. Mugambi, about some of the courses that you might be teaching at Yale, along with some of the also projects you might be involved with within the institution.
Yeah.
So do you mind sharing some of that?
Yeah, sure. So I teach themes in world Christianity, naturally. And so that is a course that I inherited from the late Lamin Sanneh. So it is a course that examines the threads and strands of thought, of methodologies, of questions that world Christianity raises and also tries to answer.
Right.
And so that's one of the core courses that I'll teach, and we have concentration students who come in concentrating on world Christianity as an important course for them. But I also teach the history of Christianity in Africa, which I normally teach. The course's title is 2,000 Years of Christianity in Africa. And for most people, they'll think of Christianity in Africa as just within the missionary era, which is from the 1800s or 1700s. But there's a longer history, even with Catholic contact, from the 1400s.
Of course, yeah.
And even an older history of what we could say indigenous forms of Christianity right from the patristic period. And so we teach that. I teach that course as well. But there are a couple of other courses that I teach. One of those is Pentecostalism and Pentecostals in Africa.
Yeah.
It's a course that for me is an opportunity to expose students to some of the things that I'm learning and things that are coming out of the research that I'm doing. And a last course that I teach is a course that connects with a lot of conversations about Christianity in our contemporary world. And so it is a course on Christianity and coloniality in contemporary Africa. And it's a course that looks at the different sectors of life in Africa and examines how Christianity interacts with coloniality in those sectors. So those are the courses that I teach, but I'm also interested in addition to those courses, and within those courses also looking at themes that are not often looked at, things like the liturgies of Pentecostal churches. In those courses, one of the things that I also bring out is the arts. Music and visual arts,
of course,
as well. So those are areas of interest of mine that find some expression in some of those classes. Now, in terms of my research, my current research, I'm in the middle of a research project right now on Pentecostal. It's also about Pentecostals. But I'm looking at their expression and looking at, on the one hand, their pneumatology, the way they think about the work of the Spirit, and also thinking about how these expressions bring about or bring an understanding of the religious imagination. And the case focus for that research is the oral liturgies of Pentecostal churches.
Okay.
So within that project, I look at these oral liturgies and I ask the question, what is in them? And what do we find in them that tells us about how people respond to religious themes?
Right.
And this project connects with world Christianity because it seems to me that in addition to missions history, in addition to church history, in addition to theology, there are other conversations that can also help us understand Christianity in the global South. And especially because world Christianity as a field of study privileges the contributions of Christians in the non-Western world.
Of course, yeah.
And that is important because for a very long time, and this was a contention for the fathers of and mothers of world Christianity studies. This was their contention. If you talk to Lamin Sane, if you talk to Andrew Walls, Dana Robert, and even those who have come after, Jehu Hansils, Afia Degame, and many others. That we don't have time to mention here. All of them have asked the question: from what point was that history told?
Yeah.
Whose lenses were being used to tell those stories of Christianity in the non-Western world? And there have been many conversations now in books written saying, look, why don't we ask that question from the other side?
Yes.
What really matters to those people, and how do they tell their story? So my current research looks at the worship service as a creative expression. And it says, these people are responding to their religious understandings. And because, services and worship is a creative process as well.
Yes.
That creative process brings out the elements that matter to them.
Yeah.
And so those then teach us about how they engage with religious subjects and religious matter. And I think that is right in the center of what world Christianity
Yes,
is
definitely.
about.
And I'm sure within those worship services, there's cultural aspects that's also involved, indigenous expressions that's also involved.
Yes.
As you mentioned, art, music, and so forth.
Yes.
So
yes.
it's a very fascinating project.
Yes. And so I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
And I'm learning many things as I look at different expressions in different parts of Africa.
All right. Okay.
And I can see some commonalities. In fact, I can see a lot of commonalities, and my research focuses on the commonalities. But there are also a lot of differences as well.
Of course.
Yes.
And I love how you mentioned about art and music and so forth.
Yes.
Today we are having this conversation in front of a very expressive and very beautiful art painting.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you can share a little bit about this, because I believe that you were the one that kind of lent this to OMSC.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the painter and what this is about?
Yeah, so this presentation, this piece of art is Oil on Campus, and was done in 2017. But I first saw it, I believe it was in 2018.
Okay.
And when I saw it, I didn't know who the artist was, and then I came back again. I think it was around 2019. And I got to meet the artist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got to meet the artist, Evans Yegon, known, with his pen name as Yegonizer. And I just couldn't resist it. And there's something about the colors. His style, he uses primaries, like yellows and blues, and reds, and uses them in contrast with each other. But for me, what fascinated me was the subject matter,
right?
Because this is the picture depicts Jesus after the resurrection, meeting with the disciples, and Thomas is asking to see the the punctures, the holes,
of course,
in his hands. And so there is a way in which this communicates to me. And again, it touches on world Christianity as far as I'm concerned, because in world Christianity, we say that the different communities receive the gospel message and express it in their own language, in their own perspective. And people, as the gospel reaches into their lives, they begin to see themselves in the story. And that's the thing about this particular piece. He's done a number of pieces, religious pieces. He has a Last Supper piece and so on. But this one, he painted with a black Jesus and black disciples.
right?
And I could see myself in this, and the fact that it's there's something about the skin color of the people. And Jesus was a Middle Easterner, so maybe he wasn't as dark. But this depiction allows me to see myself and to situate myself in that place. So who would I be? Would I be a doubting? Sometimes I'm a doubting Thomas, asking, I want to see this.
Of course.
Someone, I might be someone else who might not be so bold as doubting Thomas. Maybe ask the question, or someone else who's just, concerned about, what this did to Jesus. So I see myself in different ones of these people at different times. But throughout history, we find that as we study world Christianity through history and even contemporary, people have depicted the Christian story in their own terms, in their own, with things that they can understand, with pictures of people that they can connect with. And so if you look at Ethiopian depictions of this story or of Jesus himself, again, he's a dark-skinned person. He's someone who would relate with them in their aesthetic. And even the pictures that we know, even the picture that we know so well of the blonde Jesus, that is a picture that was painted in the Western world. Someone who depicted a Jesus that they could connect with. So that was their own perspective. And that is a major principle of world Christianity, translation, the entry of the gospel message in all its forms within particular community. So that's about this piece. I was eventually able to get it, but right now it's on loan because I am on a research sabbatical, and I wanted to try to find for a place where it could mean something to someone else. And for me, naturally, OMSC was the place, because OMSC values art and sees art as a part of the world Christianity story. And so it's here on loan. And then when it's done, to find its way back to to my space.
Of course.
But also because I'm living as a Christian in diaspora. An African Christian in diaspora, this connects me with a global story, but from my connection point as an African Christian.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for that explanation and the story behind this. And I remember first coming in one day to the OMSC House and seeing this beautiful painting, and I heard that you were the one that lent it to OMSC, so it was very fascinating to hear about it and to speak with you about it today. So thank you again.
Yes. Yeah, and I hope people who might be interested in Yegonizer can find his material. He's actually online. He can be found on Instagram and on Facebook as well. Yegonizer is the name, but
Right. Well, that's a valuable information. Thank you for that as well.
yeah.
Right. Well, kind of now shifting
Yeah.
our questions regarding more so of your publication, Dr. Mugambi. There's two specific publications that we want to discuss today
Yes.
in getting to know more about you and your work. The first one is a monograph titled A Spirit of Revitalization, which is your first single author book. I believe it was under Baylor University Press that it was published. For our listeners and our viewers that might not be familiar with this book, do you mind just briefly sharing with us what is the main argument that you're trying to make with this book? How does it contribute to the field of world Christianity?
Yes. So, Spirit of Revitalization, Pentecostalism in Kenya is a history book. It traces the story of Pentecostal thinking and Pentecostal expressions in Kenya, focusing mainly on Nairobi, but also the broader country of Kenya, in the 100 years between 1920 and 2020. And the book, the premise of the book is that Pentecostal expressions, just like other Christian expressions, that have been able to incarnate into the different places. Pentecostal expressions, and this particular Pentecostal expression in Kenya, with all its diversity, is primarily an indigenous movement. And I show how within within Pentecostal expressions, how there are roots or connections with missionary Christianity, but also very strong contributions by leadership and by communities within the country that actually made Pentecostal Christianity thrive.
Right.
So that's the broad picture. But I also look at different expressions that have appeared, different expressions of charismatic Christianity that have appeared over those 100 years.
Of course.
Within the book, it is a kind of a history of mission and contemporary social history, which looks at some of the social forces, cultural forces, and political happenings that form the context within which this Pentecostalism has grown. And you can see the interesting interactions between these. And we can also see the indigenous initiative, what I like to call indigenous agency, within those movements that make this a very Kenyan, very African movement, despite how it looks.
Well, thank you for introducing your book. Now, regarding the second publication, it's an upcoming publication. February 2025 is the publication date. It is titled Christians in the City of Nairobi. It is a co-edited volume with Dr. Mark Shaw, and it's under Bloomsbury Publishing. And since it's not out, we're shooting this in November 2024. But I was wondering if you could say a brief word about introducing the book. Similarly, what are you trying to argue throughout this book, and what you see how this book contributes to our field of world Christianity.
So this is a book that we have actually co-authored. So it's actually a co-authored book with Mark Shaw, and it is a look at Christians in the city of Nairobi. It's part of a wider series with Bloomsbury Academic that is looking at Christian expressions in the cities, in the major cities of the world. And the vision for that series is to connect to 50 cities of the world, 50 of the most important cities in the world. And Nairobi, within East Africa, Nairobi, one could say Nairobi is a hub of East Africa in certain ways. There are other cities as well that have contributions, Addis Ababa and so on. But Nairobi would be a hub in a particular way in terms of a kind of political and economic sense, and it's also one of the cultural centers as well. But in this particular book, we do two things. One, we map onto the series by looking at Christian expressions in Nairobi as a unique case study, and that's what the series does. The series goes to different cities and says, what's the flavor of Christianity in these places? What does it look like? How, who are the key people there, and how do they express themselves? What are the churches that you find? And so that's on one level. But on another level, Mark Shaw and I kind of dig deeper, and we say, when we look at Christianity in Nairobi, and we look at whether it is the church, the Holy Family Basilica, which is the main Catholic church in the city, or All Saints Cathedral, which is an Anglican church, or whether you go to any one of the Pentecostal churches, in downtown Nairobi, or even in the suburbs and the neighborhoods. What do you see? You see a Christianity, first of all, which is at this point in history very vibrant. And so, at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, there will be a service in the Anglican church. There will be a service in the Catholic church. There will be services in multiple Pentecostal churches. There probably will be an online service somewhere, and of course there will be people in the mosque as well. And we are looking in below the surface, and we are seeing something unique that's happening, that the city, which is supposed to be a modern space, is supposed to be progressive and secular and global and all those things, which some people would have argued maybe 20 years ago, say, well, it's leaving behind religion and moving towards progress. We see kind of the opposite happening, that the more global it looks, the more modern it looks, the more religious it seems to be trying to be. The more we find, we're going to hear the loudspeakers in the city, proclaiming, a mission, or preachers on the streets, and worshiping communities. So the book looks at the ways in which spaces are being kind of resacralized in Nairobi, where we see like new patterns of people relating with one another and engaging their spirituality. We have a chapter in there as well about Christian-Muslim relations, and just how that interfaces with other faiths, with Christianity especially. We look at some of the interesting and somewhat contested waters of religion and politics, and how that plays itself out in Nairobi, which would be maybe not typical of all African cities, but that would be somewhat representative, of course, of African cities. So that's what we're doing with that book.
Wow. Sounds very fascinating.
We try. We try to make the book accessible. And so in that sense, it's not like a really big book. But nevertheless, we think that if people read the book, they'll have a good sense. And anyone that wants to come to Nairobi, for example, and wants to understand what does lived religion look like, what does the kind of theology and the practice of religion, the liturgies and so on, they'll get a good kind of start head of start.
Of course, in a way, a guidebook to the city of Nairobi and understanding. As you mentioned, Christianity there. Looking forward to reading your work as you authored it together with Dr. Mark Shaw. So looking forward to that.
Thank you. It was fun writing it, and we look forward to what conversations will come out of that,
course.
and possibly other books as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Kind of now segueing into the last portion of our interview today, is thinking about some of your challenges that you encountered as you have been engaging with your writings and scholars within the field of world Christianity.
Yeah.
Some of the things that has been kind of on your mind as you've been researching. A big question that I like to ask is, what do you think is missing, or what do you think needs to be discussed more
Yeah.
within our field of world Christianity as we move forward, as we move towards the future
Yeah.
in this field? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing some of your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. This is something that I have, thought about for some time, and it is the question of in what ways can we better tell the story of Christians from around the world. Now, as a world Christianity scholar, I am very aware that in the past, when we talk about mission history, we'll find that mission history often was told from the standpoint of the missionary, and usually it was a Western missionary. And like I said a little earlier, different scholars, historians especially, have been very critical of that, and they've said, look, the story just can't be told from one perspective. And so, world Christianity then started as a field in the 1990s and has continued to grow in several different directions. But every time we have to come back and ask, okay, so if the story is being told to privilege the non-Western world, which is really the majority world now, what are the ways in which those stories can be told? Right. What are the ways? History becomes a very important anchor point. The history. But like you'd imagine, history as an anchor point is still very connected to the missionary movement.
Of course.
Especially once you start going, 200 years ago, 150 years ago. And missions, same thing. Theology, the same thing. And so we need new conversation partners that need to come in and join in the story and be able to connect the dots. And in certain, for example, at Princeton Theological Seminary, we have historians and now social scientists saying, now these people can contribute to the telling of the story. And then we also have theologians, and this is happening in other places as well, where we have theologians who are asking the question. At Yale, for example, we have at least one theologian, a couple of theologians who are saying, okay, so how do we look at this story of world Christianity from a theological perspective, and looking at a non-Western perspective as well. And we're seeing that in Edinburgh as well. We have that. We have historians, Boston University. We have other people contributing from Africa. Places like Crawford Chrysler Institute, Africa International University, and so on. And so, for me, what needs a lot more emphasis is to begin to ask, how can we open up history so that it accommodates theologians who are asking some of these questions. How can we have them talking? How can we have mission scholars talking and making a contribution? What are some of the ways, what are some of the questions that can be asked from a historical perspective and a social science perspective? In my own research, I use ethnography as a useful tool to tell contemporary social history. And so for me, I'm constantly asking, how do we expand that space? And right now, I am asking, how can we expand that space so that we can have people from the arts speaking into world Christianity, or at least questions from the artistic perspective. We now have people who are asking questions, for example, from artistic perspective, who are asking movement, performance. How does that go? We have, a scholar from Texas who's looking at that perspective as well. Professor Adelakun, and others, from Africa who are also looking at that. And for me, so that's one area. The arts, how are they speaking into this? I'm also interested in liturgics. Liturgy has a very strong performative dimension, creative dimension, historical dimension, and theological dimension. And for me, I feel liturgical studies have something useful for us as world Christianity scholars. After all, if you're studying Christian expressions,
of course,
then liturgy is right at the center. And I think people who study liturgy would be very interested, in coming into the space and talking with world Christianity people, because liturgy, when you look back, 1,000 years, when you pull back 1,500 years and start asking questions about liturgy, you're going to find that in those periods, there's a certain kind of world Christianity perspective,
of course.
Way back, where you have a lot of cross-pollination of Christian expressions at that time. So I think those are areas that can open up as we continue. I see myself as kind of opening those doors, and then for people coming in and having that conversation. Now, of course, we cannot discount history, because I think from where I sit and from my perspective as a historian, there are some anchor points,
of course,
and history and theology, mission studies are very important anchor points, because it's history that has brought us to where we are. And with it's the omissions of history that now make us ask the questions. Okay, so what has been left out?
Of course.
And I feel, I think this is a wonderful opportunity we have now, which I think Lamin Sane, Andrew Walls, and others, Dana Robert and others, have kind of opened for us. And here at Princeton, Raimundo Barreto and Afe Adogame have been pushing the envelope and saying social sciences, let them come in. And where we have people asking questions beyond history, like in Emory we have Jehu Hansfield, raising some of those questions. Others asking questions about ecumenicity. Peter Fan and Dale Irvin doing wonderful work and saying, okay, so how do we see this thing differently from wider perspective?
Of course,
So I'm joining those voices and saying, how we know what the core is, we know what the history is, we know how we've gotten to where we are, but how do we open up our minds and begin to privilege the voices and the concerns that come from global perspectives.
Of course. Thank you so much, Dr. Mugambi, for raising some important aspects. And I think we see those kind of movements opening up doors with conferences, I think, within the themes, within the papers that are presented. I think it is indeed heading that way, to that direction. But I thank you so much for kind of putting that on a loudspeaker in a way for our audience to also listen to your perspective and some of the specific themes, as you mentioned, art, liturgy, and so forth. So thank you for highlighting that as well. And for our possible future graduate students,
Yeah.
students that might be interested in applying for PhD within the field of world Christianity.
Yeah.
In talking about some of the things that are missing, what are also some of the challenges or some of the encouragement that you would like to say?
Yeah.
Words of advice for our viewers and listeners who are mostly from the global South, who are interested in continuing to study world Christianity. Would you like to say any words of advice for them in
Yes.
terms of, yeah?
Yeah, I think the the story of Christianity is a long one. It's 2,000 years. Some would argue more.
Yeah.
It starts before Jesus. And it is a very moving story. It has a lot of good things that align with what Christianity stands for, but it has also some terrible things
Yes.
that are associated with Christianity now, but really don't stand. Christianity does not advocate for them, but they're associated. And there are places where the story has been very extensively told, maybe not exhaustively, but extensively. But then there are places where the story has not been told.
Yeah.
And my encouragement for people considering, courses in world Christianity, whether they'll come here to Princeton or they'll go to the Yale Divinity School or Emory or some of the other places, and there are many wonderful institutions here in the global north that are doing world Christianity, both in the US, in Europe, and so on. And then we also have a few institutions, in Asia and Africa as well, that are concerned with world Christianity. We have new programs developing in my country. We have a number of universities already that have world Christianity programs. My encouragement for graduate students entering into that field is to be keen to tell the story that hasn't been told. Because there are many stories that haven't been told, and many perspectives that need to be illumined. And for those scholars, they need to push beyond the well-worn, the easy route. They need to push beyond that and to look at what is staring at them in the faces but hasn't been said yet. And so I'd be very interested to see people ask themselves questions about the music in their churches. The music in Africa or Asia or South America or Eastern Europe. I'll be very interested in seeing liturgical studies and how that feeds into world Christianity. I'm very interested in seeing how different traditions interact with one another. For example, in places like Ethiopia, which has had Christianity right from the beginning. And then we have new missionary movements that have come up recently. What are the interactions there? Another very interesting thing has been how different parts of Christianity have risen in different places, and then there have been cross-pollination.
Of course,
We have Professor Klaus Koshoka, who's been talking about this for a long time. About the interrelatedness of Christianity in world Christianity. Has been doing that from Germany.
The polycentricity of
polycentricity of world Christianity. And he's taught that for many years, and has seen it. It would be wonderful to see PhDs and master's theses that are telling that story from their own perspectives, and beginning to research this from missions perspectives, from history perspectives. And they don't have to wait to publish a book. That's a second encouragement. We have world Christianity conferences that are happening. We have Princeton OMSC World Christianity Conference happens every March. That's a good place to present your paper and to begin to seed your thinking to other people. We have the Yale Edinburgh Conference as well. We have various hubs of these conferences happening in Ghana, Accra, Nairobi. We have interactions that are going on in places like Asia, Korea, and Europe. Edinburgh. So all of these places and workshops. Lots of workshops going on in Europe as well. So that's a second encouragement I'll give the potential students. And then I think as a third encouragement is to say, from amongst many students, there'll be people who are career students or people who have people who have that kind of scholarly perspective. But looking at my own story and the story of people, for example, who have been in the mission field, people like Andrew Walls, who was a missionary as well.
Right.
It would be interesting to see people who join in from amongst the scholars, to see people join in back from the various places where they have participated in the church in different capacities.
Right.
And so those people bring with them an inside experience that can greatly enrich the fields.
Yes.
I don't think we need only one, just the people who do a scholarly study. We also need, if you have been a pastor before and you're sensing a call to get into academia, get in there and contribute from your experiences, from your contacts, from the stories that you've had, and contribute a piece that then complements what else other people are studying. If you've been a missionary or an evangelist, or all those different roles that people work, people who've been in non-governmental, non-profit work, and have been working in different parts of the world. It will be interesting to see how that works. People who've been diplomats and so on, and have seen new things happening in different parts of the world. I think all need to contribute to that story. And the melting pots, the places to meet are, in these conferences, and now we also have online options.
Of course,
where we have workshops online, we have webinars online, and so on. And then the final challenge is, once you do that, write your book.
Of course.
Write your book and make it available. And now we have multiple publishers who are publishing world Christianity stories. And regional stories. Almost every major publisher, academic publisher in the US and Europe has some series that will fit. Whether it's Oxford, Cambridge, Baylor, Penn State University, Press, Duke, Ohio. All of these are, Harvard. They have African studies. Some of them have world Christianity series. Others have Asian studies, Southeast Asian studies, and all of those are contributing to the telling of this story.
Yes.
That includes voices that have not been heard before.
Well, thank you so much for those wonderful words of advice, and I really appreciated your enriching story and your journey, how your answers really go in line with your own personal interests, and also, in a way, telling the story of what world Christianity is. Dr. Mugambi, as a final question, I know we haven't talked about this prior to our interview today, but a question that I like to prepare as an impromptu question, and a final question is, I ask my interviewees if they can complete a sentence, and that sentence is, what world Christianity is, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
But don't answer it in a very long way, but something that comes to your mind as a single sentence, and kind of, and I'm not trying to make you essentialize what world Christianity is, but something that comes to your mind right now in completing that sentence. World Christianity is, if you can share your thoughts in 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah, I have to think.
Yeah, please take your time. It's okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so here's my shot.
Okay.
Here's my shot. So world Christianity is telling a story that hasn't been told and telling it authentically. Yeah.
I like that. Thank you so much, Dr. Mugambi, for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking with you, getting to know more about you and your work and your interests. And many blessings to you, Dr. Mugambi, on your future research.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.